Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to do a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Jen's Portico Quartet, On the Light. So that's what we're going to check out. I don't think we've had them on the channel before. If we have, we're like at 1,100 reactions so far. It's a lot of music to take in over the course of I don't even know how long. There's a chance we've heard these before and I just don't remember. Let's dive into this Portico Quartet with the track On the Light. Oh, I was trying to figure out what that tapping was. It's the drums. Yeah, so it is 4, but there's this really nice weight to it. This is very emotive. That snare work. I love that pad they got back there. I love when a song recontextualizes itself and helps me understand what is going on. Because I'll be honest, the first half of this, I was kind of lost. I was enjoying elements, but not the bigger picture. I couldn't see what it was attempting to demonstrate or to lean into. And when the second half kicked in, it filled in all the blanks. It was gorgeous. And we got the outro though, and I don't know what to make of that. So I guess I guess I'm not gonna have a perfect read on this, but I did vastly enjoy this. I want to touch on theme, atmosphere, emotion first, and then I want to talk about some individual elements I really enjoyed. And that should wrap this up. Just two sections of analysis here. So there is a lot going on in this song. The drum is frequently playing unique ideas. It is just nonstop, great with dynamics, um, just fascinating idea. The piano is two part. We have one that's primarily looking at chords, creating our foundation, our emotional foundation, even in some cases. And then we also have an embellishing idea every two bars or so, just having a couple notes. Boom, boom. Wait a little bit. Boom, boom, boom. Just like these little embellishing ideas at the end of phrases. Really beautiful stuff. Very restrained, but works so well in the context of everything, especially when all of our layers start to get filled in. We have a synth pad that just fills the space with this warm fuzziness. It augments what the chords are doing in our piano, so it doesn't really have its own function as far as pitch goes, but it adds texture to the whole thing, and it's just the song would not be the same without it. We occasionally have a synth melody, but it's used less sparingly, and it's primarily used as counterpoint to augment what our saxophone, I think, is doing. I say saxophone because, well, this would be a phenomenal piece for a saxophone to be playing. I. Whoa, okay. Bass guitar, which I did not hear. Same with the cello. I did not hear a cello. It could be that these are just people in the band, though. This is not a quartet, though. um, there's two synthesizers, two pianists, a saxophone, a violin, a drum, a cello, and a bass. I did not hear all of that in this track. It might be completely on me that I just missed it entirely. And I might have been led astray because it's called Portico Quartet. And once I heard four individual lines, maybe I just stopped listening for new ones or attributed them to other sounds. Anyways, I guess that is a saxophone, which means that there is some phenomenal circulatory breathing going on in here because that saxophone does not quit. Yeah, I can't. I'm trying to picture where the breaths would have been taken, and maybe on the second half there might have been some idea, but the first lick that the saxophone had, I don't know where breaths would have been taken. I'm thinking there would have been some circulatory breathing in there. I gotta listen to this again now because I was gonna lean into this and say that I was pretty sure it was a digital saxophone. And now that it's not, like, is there anything that I would want to listen for knowing that it was a live performance? Because I do listen to instruments differently if they're live or digital, especially when it comes to aerophones, just because There's just a lot of little nuances that the human body does when they play an aerophone that can be replicated in some of the most expensive sound libraries for these instruments, but isn't always replicated. And they're little things that, typically I would point out too, and I just wasn't listening for him here. Anyways, though, let's we got a bit sidetracked there. This is how the song is crafted, right? We have a foundational element, which is texture and chords. We have our lead melody on our saxophone, and then we have embellishing ideas in the piano and synthesizer, and we have our drums just killing it with this constant forward momentum, but not overbearing. And both of our sections are kind of built on this, but they use these same techniques to achieve different vibes. The first half of the track, to me, is filled with tension, um, from a couple of sources. One is just going to be harmonic. We do enter into some really interesting note intervals that give us these really tense, dissonant elements. But it's also part of the production. The saxophone to me is, it's got a bit of a bite to it. It's almost a bit sharp, not pitch wise, but production wise. It's very angled and pointed. It just kind of cuts through everything. It pierces through the whole sound, and it's already pretty high up there on the EQ. And I found it to be a bit distracting, bordering on annoying. It was not. I was not too happy with it. Um, and then not only that, but it was doing this very similar repeated three descending notes over and over and over again. Um, and while our second lick for the latter half of the track does feature a repeated motif, I thought it was better mixed into what everything else was doing, better connected to the emotions the rest of the band was trying to portray, and more emotive overall just on the lick itself. It had more character to it than just this descending quarter notes, I think it was. But I think it's entirely intentional, right? I think its purpose was to be a bit aggressive, kind of like nails on a chalkboard kind of style, because this whole section was filled with tension in different ideas, whether it was a chordal tension or a production tension or anything like that. We could even feel the drums, which is interesting because the drums don't really change much between the two. It's just frequent use of these ghost notes on the snare, with these ever changing rhythmic patterns, and really fast cymbal playing with these tom fills at the end of every 8 bars or whatever, and sparse use of the kick drum to accent and augment our snare rhythm. That really doesn't change, but what it brings out does because of the instruments around it. In the beginning, all of the tension brings about this rising adrenaline, is what I get out of it. Right? It's this underlying rhythmic push to just keep going forward. You can't really stop the song as much as you might want to at times. The drums keeps pushing it forward, and with the tension and the unease in the music, it feels like this adrenaline spike, fight or flight kicking in. After this, we have a small moment in the middle of the track where it's kind of peaceful. I think the drums quit out. A lot of the instruments quit out. We come down to just piano and the synth pad, if I remember correctly. And it's very serene. Whatever happened out of this adrenaline fueled rush, tranquility, transcendence has happened. And out of this piece rises our final 2 minutes of the track or whatever, where it is weightless. There's a massive catharsis. Everything is teetering on just completely gorgeous writing. Even our saxophone, which, as I mentioned in the first half, was a bit too aggressive in its sound for me, comes out here, and while it is still a bit of an avant-garde melodic line, it's still rhythmically obtuse compared to everything else around it. It kind of fits in a way. It kind of finds that weird shape that by itself is kind of odd, but in the context of the larger puzzle of all the other pieces in the track, it shines. And it is just this transcendent moment of becoming one with whatever is happening and finding beauty in that rather than fear and tension. And this is where things started to click for me, and I began to reinterpret what the beginning might have been. And I came to the visuals in my mind of an animal learning to fly, maybe even on a night sky. And that moment when it clicks and the aerodynamics all work and gravity is being defied is that Zen moment we get in the middle, and really leaning into it and enjoying the freedom of flight is what we get at the end. And a lot of the beauty and warmth that shows up in the synthesizer and uh, well, actually, both of the synthesizer parts, the atmospheric one and the melodic counterpoint, to me, though the warmth that comes out of there is like the sun coming over the horizon. And as this animal learned to control their flight, the darkness also was starting to get pushed out, and the sunlight was slowly coming in, and this bird, especially if there's like fog or like heavy clouds, I say bird but animal, we're going to stick with animal even though most animals that fly are birds. But this animal is now able to fly on these beams of light as they cut through the clouds. And that's kind of the imagery I got out of this gorgeous moment of overcoming fears to do something. What is that word? That was like the longest pause I've ever had on the channel. To do something that opens up things for you. It I don't know, man. I really had something going there. Freeing. Dang, why did it take me so long? Yes, learning to do something that is dangerous at first and difficult, but overcoming that fear, leaning into it, mastering the technique, and having your opportunities opened up because of it, and really enjoying the freedom that is now allotted to you. And it was just a gorgeous journey. And because this is what came up into my head about 4 or 5 minutes into this track, it really surprised me when our outro kind of took a different turn. I was expecting either to end on a really high note, not pitch wise, but just, the song was building. We had all these fantastic uh, chord progression swells that were leaning towards this majesty and this beauty and its freedom, this warmth, and then we kind of tapered it all down and kind of ended on something that wasn't tense like the beginning, but a little uneasy still. And I don't know what to make of that part. It doesn't quite fit in with what I was feeling, but what I was feeling might not have been their intent either. And that's the cool thing about art. Now, I mentioned aside from emotion and storytelling, I also want to touch on some very specific things. One is the saxophone part in the second half, and sort of the rhythmic, well, actually, just rhythm in general. especially when we look at the piano part in the first half, which I mentioned had like an ebb and flow to it, right? It was 4/4, but it had like a rhythmic element to it where we kind of like had movement and then a stop, and then movement and a stop. It was kind of weighted in this way. We had like 2.5 beats of movement and a beat and a half of pause. And we saw some of this weighted movement in the saxophone in the second half as well. And I really liked this weighted symmetry because it's not symmetrical by itself. Obviously, 2.5 and 1.5 is not symmetrical. It'd have to be split down the middle for 2 beats and 2 beats for pure symmetry, but there is a natural flow to it. And I feel going along with the whole story I had in my head was the movement of wings. Birds don't just flap up and down like robots, right? There's a little bit of a flow to it, a little bit of pause at the end of the movement. It's very natural to have this weighted concept in the rhythm. Only robots are, move at, solid speeds all the time without acceleration or deceleration or stopping pauses or anything like that. So there's something very natural about having this breathing process in the rhythm. I think it's phenomenal. It adds so much character to the song and just blends itself well into what I was picturing in my head. And I really enjoy that. The other thing I wanted to touch on was the drumming. And oh, I forgot to talk about this kind of, but I had mentioned that it was like an adrenaline rush at the beginning of the track where the fear and stuff was kind of creating this fight or flight instinct. But then at the end, it's like a positive adrenaline rush, like going on a roller coaster, right? And just having this freedom and realizing that this is what you can do and pushing that. Like, I just love how the drum didn't have to change for its interpretation to alter. Just beautiful writing. But, anyways, I really love the drum work. There is a ton of micro accents, different timbres from one instrument. Like the snare gives us so many different sounds on this. I wonder if it is a bit more of a condensed drum kit. I'm thinking what I heard was bass kick, snare, two toms, and a hi hat and maybe a ride, and that was kind of it. So at least from what they played and what I picked up from what they played, it's a bit of a smaller kit, which is very cool because smaller kits tend to increase creativity. The snare isn't just what you hit to get that sharp crack. It has a lot of sounds, and you have to understand that because if you want any variety, you don't have the number of instruments to do that. It's not like a big rock drum kit where there's 10 toms and 50 cymbals and, so many other different instruments that, you have all these options of timbres from each individual aspect. You really have to remember that the snare also has a rim, it also has the side, it also has a stand that it's placed on top of, and all these things. Percussion is just noises from hitting things. You can hit any part of a drum. You don't have to hit the drum head. There's also cross sticking and ghost notes, which we got a ton of in here. The cymbal can be hit in the middle, on the edge, on the bell. Like there's so many different sounds you can make out of each instrument, and having a condensed kit really pushes someone to understand that. And I feel like this drummer really gets it. There's so many nuanced sounds. I mean, even at the beginning, we got some sort of clicking sound that I think, in retrospect, was hitting the rim of the drum, I mean of the snare, but at the time I took my headphones off because I thought there was some clicking going on outside because it's not something you would normally have in a song, and it's little things like that. And when you mix it with the wide variety of sounds we have mixed with the speed of it all, but also the dynamics of it all, right? Even though we had a lot of ghost notes on the snare, there was still an overall pulse and rhythm to it, an ebb and flow, because some of them were accented and some of them weren't. And that same accent pattern was not found in the cymbal accent pattern. So it's just a masterful display of drumming here. And I loved every bit of it. It adds so much character. It is an integral aspect to the track, not just in a rhythmic timekeeping fashion, which it does phenomenally, but also adding to the emotions of the song. It's just, I could gush about the drumming all day. It was so good. And that's not to put, any of the other musicians down here. Everything else was a bit more withheld in order to achieve the proper atmosphere and storytelling. Not everybody's going to be able to go all in. When you do that, you end up with an over the top prog rock song, and that's not what this was going for. So I'm sure in other songs, the rest of the musicians get to show off different aspects and different tracks. This one to me was really, really a drum centric track as far as technical playing comes from. Yeah, so those are my thoughts on Portico Quartet. Someone called me out on this on the Godowski video. My C's are very soft, and I'm catching it now, and I swear that I sounded like I said Portico instead of Portico because my C, I just have a really soft K sound. It was like Portico, but like I know it was a C. I thought I said a C, but it was just very soft. So Portico Quartet. I got to get better at that. I'm a professional speaker. I should be able to speak with better enunciation. So those are my thoughts on Portico Quartets. On that sounds weird. On the light. Let me know what you thought. Did you enjoy it? Anything that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Let me know down in the comments. Above that, if you could head into the description box, in there is a link for Linktree, which takes you to this place right here. Has links for everything related to the channel. You can find my music, you can find the community Discord server, you can find ways to support the channel, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. Alright. Wow. Alright. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.